Hello and welcome to another playoff edition of the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. Make sure you follow OTG on Twitter at OTGBasketball. I'm your host, Nick Fay. Harris couldn't make it today, but with us today is my 845 connection, Kory Waldron.
Nick, how you doing? Glad to be on this edition of the Outlet for this NBA playoff talk. Thanks for having me on. I'm sorry that Harris couldn't be here, but I'm glad to fill in.
We're going to talk about a series. I know this one's a little bit close to your heart, as Harris would say. Cavs and Pacers. Pacers got swept. Cavs knocked them out. It was a more competitive series than a sweep, I would say. But what were your initial thoughts?
That series easily could have won 6 games, I think. You know, you had the missed opportunity by C.J. Miles. You had the 25-point lead that the Pacers blew. But at the end of the day, LeBron James was LeBron James. He was in 30 dark zero mode, or whatever he says before the playoffs start. He nearly averaged a triple-double. He didn't really have a great supporting cast effort. I know Kyrie was kind of iffy. Kevin Love was iffy, but they had like a big game 2 or big game 3. The champs took care of business. That's all that you can really say.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, the Pacers easily could have pushed us to 6. I think if they won game 1 of the series, it would have sent a different vibe for the Cavs and for the Pacers. And like you said, they had that big lead they blew. And, in some of the other games, they were right there at the end. Even the elimination game, they had a shot at the end to tie it, and they just couldn't capitalize. Paul George was great. The rest of the guys, some of them stepped up, some of them didn't. I think they needed somebody to really, really get hot and kind of like match with the Cavs. Because like you mentioned, Kyrie and Love didn't have a huge consistent series. So there was opportunities there, and LeBron handled business as he always does. If LeBron wants to win a game, he pretty much can. The only team that really can possibly stop the Cavs, I would say, is the Warriors.
It was one of the things that always sticks out to me when watching LeBron and the Cavs is just how effortless LeBron gets to the rim. He's such a big guy, but he just flows through the air when he gets to the rim. It's kind of ridiculous how a guy his size at his age still has not lost a step as he continues to dominate in these playoffs.
Exactly. I mean, and he can get by his defender pretty easily. And like you said, he almost glides to the rim. He floats in the air. It's kind of crazy. But was there anything you noticed about the Cavs that you thought was oh, this could kind of hurt them in the rest of the playoffs or in the finals?
I didn't see anything that would necessarily hurt them. But what I can say is that 25-point collapse, they won that game. And I know that this has been talked about several times already. I'm not sure if you guys touched on it, but they did it without Kyrie or Love on the floor. LeBron did it with the bench players in, Channing Frye, Darren Williams, Kyle Korver. He had the role players in, and he orchestrated a comeback where they didn't even have a turnover in the fourth quarter and maybe only one in the second half against the Pacers, which is absolutely incredible. And we always say, in playoffs, your bench has to come up. Like we saw with Houston, which we'll probably talk about, their bench stepped up with Lou Will and Eric Gordon. For the Cavs, Darren Williams has played very well. Channing Frye has played very well. Your bench players have to step up. And for me, seeing players on the Cavs step up when Kyrie and Love struggle, that only means good things. But the defense is still the issue.
Yeah, the defense is definitely still the issue. But they showed the ability to tighten it up a little bit more. But still, you want to get in the better habits, especially in the playoffs, of playing great defense. But you made a great point. We touched, Harris and I, and actually Parr touched on that a little bit. And, the Cavs have the ability to play some of these bench guys, and they can come in and play better than some of the other team's starters. Just because they're talented basketball players, they have high basketball IQs, and it kind of fits to the point what you're talking about, LeBron getting to the rim, because they're able to surround him with shooters. And some of these guys, you don't even want to give them an extra step. And you give him a step, LeBron's going to find him open for the 3, or you're going to let LeBron drive to the rim and get an easy layup. So it's do or die. It's, you have 2 poisons when you face the Cavs. What you're going to do? You're going to stop LeBron, or you're going to stop the 3-point shooters.
And also, it's kind of scary too, the fact that the Cavs' key 3-point shooters like J.R. Smith, Kevin Love, and Kyrie, they haven't really been effective. It's more been, Kyle Korver, Darren Williams, Channing Frye. You're looking at the role players having big games early, which gives, the stars more time to rest and really just wait to have to, shine.
Yeah, honestly, Darren Williams, I think, is probably having a better playoff series than his last 2 series with the Nets.
Well, he's at least healthier than those last 2 series.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't put up 0 points yet, so I think that he's doing pretty good. But enough about that. On to the next series. We had another sweep this weekend, and that was the Warriors and Blazers. This is kind of no surprise to anybody. No offense to the Warriors, but they just handled business.
Was this series boring?
Yeah, honestly, this is a series I watched the least because
I think I watched one game.
Yeah, like this is a series I kind of already knew it was going to happen. No offense, especially after game one when CJ and Dame, I think, combined for like 70 plus and they didn't win. I just kind of knew that, they had no chance. And then especially, KD missed a game and they still couldn't win. Then KD and Kerr were out and they didn't win, so the Warriors just look like super deadly right now. And I definitely would not want to face them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I watched that first game. I think that's the only game I watched bits and pieces. But that first game I watched, and after watching CJ and Dame put up the most they could and still lose, I was, there was just no hope. Lillard was silly to say 6 games, but I get it. You have to think you're gonna win. But that was, and Kevin Durant only played 2 games in the series?
Yeah, and he wasn't even like, fully spry.
Yeah. The Warriors look very deadly. Any concerns during the regular season, I think, are out the window at this point.
I got a question for you. Do you think the Warriors will lose a game before the finals?
Yeah, they're going to lose a game next round.
You think they're going to? Well, okay. I will touch on that point later because I have an idea where you're going with that. But talking about another series that ended last night, and that's the Rockets and OKC. Rockets took care of business in 5 games. A lot of people hope this series wins 7 because this was a very exciting series, but OKC just doesn't have the firepower to match Houston.
Yeah, this was an extremely entertaining series, though. All 5 games were pretty much close until the fourth quarter, depending on Westbrook. But it was a lot of fun to watch. And the thing also Houston was very similar to Cleveland in the sense that their starters really didn't play well. James Harden struggled the last couple games of the series. Beverly was hot early. Ryan Anderson didn't do much. Clint Capella had an awful series for the most part. And they still found a way to win 4-1 over an OKC team I think that the nation can finally say is just not very good besides Westbrook. The poor guy couldn't stay off the floor without them giving up a lead. But yeah, Houston took care of business. The first series I called correctly to this point.
This is actually one that Harris isn't here, and I can't really brag about it because he picked OKC. I picked Houston. I felt confident with OKC with Houston, and like you mentioned, their starters weren't great, but having Lou Williams and Eric Gordon off the bench was just huge. Those guys were game changers. Even when Harden had his rough game, they're able to pick up. And then Nene just came in, and he was just dominant.
Oh, you can't forget about Nene's Game 4 performance. I almost forgot about that 28-point game. That was crazy. Yeah.
And I think I didn't check the numbers recently, but I would think that he's still shooting like close to 80 or 90% from the field, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and like you said too, on the role players, they have. I think personally, I pick Eric Gordon to win 6th Man of the Year, but Eric Gordon or Lou Will are going to be the 6th mans in my opinion. They have the 2 top candidates, and Lou Will, I have seen him hit so many crazy contested shots this first round that there's just so much offense on Houston that makes them so deadly. And given the fact that they now have a decent amount of rest with Spurs and Memphis going to Game 6, that Harden can maybe heal up his ankle a little bit and get a little bit healthier. Yeah,
exactly. And like you said, like they have so much help. It'd be interesting to see if they make a change and go with one of the 2 in the starting lineup if they want more pop, because like you mentioned, the starters have been a little bit iffy, and Lou Williams and Eric Gordon have both been great. And Lou, he creates scoring out of nothing. Like he could just be standing there like 4 feet behind the 3-point line, then all of a sudden he just decides to launch it and it's a swoosh. So it's just such a luxury to have when you have so many tough shot makers on your team. And then they have Patrick Beverly, who is, he's just chippy and he's there to annoy the shit out of you. And he did that to Westbrook. I saw a stat today. I think Westbrook had 5 turnovers and he shot like 7 of 27 when guarded by Beverly. So he did his job.
He's all defensive, even though Westbrook will say he's not. He had a fantastic series. And Beverly's one of those guys. I'm trying to think of a player who reminds me of who. He's not anything special, but I guess Lance. He has that intensity and that attitude that really just fuels the guys around him. Because, James Harden really isn't a fiery kind of guy. But when you have a guy like Beverly, when he's like getting in Westbrook's face, and like last night there's a new meme from Westbrook's face when him and Beverly got in that little exchange. And Beverly's just that guy who, if you're on his team, you love him. If you're not, you hate him.
Exactly. There's a couple guys like that in the league, and he's definitely one of them. And I even Beverly's play though, he does do some good things on the floor. Like he's an underrated offensive rebounder. A few times in the series, he was able to swoop in there, grab a quick offensive rebound, and get the easy 2 points. And he just kind of does those little things that every team needs. But Capella, you mentioned it. He did not have a very good series, and I think that's something they're going to need. He's somebody they're going to need to play better in the next round if they want to advance. You
know what I think it is? I just think Adams. The one thing I can't say about Houston struggling is OKC is an underrated defensive unit. I mean, they've been as good as they were this year, not just because of Westbrook's triple doubles, but for the fact that they're long and athletic and can play pretty well defense. I just think Adams was just a big body, and he just really abused Capella down low. And next series, despite who wins, he's going to have the same problem. If they face Memphis, he's going to have to go against Marc Gasol, one of the top 5 centers in the league, or he's going to have to go against the Spurs, who are always tough regardless.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, that could be an issue for them going forward too. And you mentioned it, OKC was such a good defensive team this year, and all they had offensively was really Westbrook. They don't really have the weapons around him. So I'm kind of surprised like they didn't try to really like slow down the game a lot more in that series. Especially when you're going to struggle to score. Like, I get it, you want to get out and get easy, fast break points, but you also need to slow down the game because Houston wants the high pace. They want to score 120, and they have guys that they can just throw at you and just keep launching threes all game, and you really have only one dominant scorer on your team and one true scorer, and that's Westbrook. The rest of the guys need stuff created for them.
And the one thing Houston did very well is they took Kanter out of the series.
Yeah. Every time he went on the floor, they just attacked him, and he was on the bench.
He only played 3 minutes in Game 5, and he was arguably their best player off the bench all season because he was a consistent offensive threat, and they couldn't even use him, which was a huge advantage to Houston.
Exactly, and you could even argue that Kanter would be probably one of their top 2 or top 3 options offensively on that team because at least you can throw him the ball in the post and he can do a little bit of something.
Yeah, I don't think he would have been useless offensive, but like you said, every time he touched the floor, it was attack Kanter to keep attacking the rim.
Yeah, and it worked. And Victor Oladipo, somebody people wanted to step up. He really didn't step up in this series, and it's tough for OKC. They definitely need to go grab somebody to make Westbrook's life a lot easier.
Yeah, I have a question about Oladipo for you, Nick. Do you think this is a little bit during the a little off topic, but do you think Russell Westbrook hindered his growth this year?
It's tough to say. Oladipo's at a point. He's been in the league 3 or 4 years now. Like he should have a lot of growth, and he kind of knew what he was getting into this year with Westbrook. And I mean, maybe Westbrook hindered his growth a little bit. Obviously having the ball so much, but the coaches could have done something different. They could have brought Oladipo off the bench or kind of played him when Westbrook was off the floor to give him more opportunities. So I think some of it's on OKC for not developing in Westbrook, but also some of it's Oladipo. I think the hype of him in his rookie year just was really high, and I just don't know if he's going to get that much better than he is right now.
All right, yeah, I agree with that. And a little tidbit of information that I just got on my phone: the Rockets owner Leslie Alexander was fined $100,000 for confronting a referee in Game 5.
It's so funny when I saw that happen on the screen. I thought it was just like a fan, and I was like, "Yeah, this dude's getting kicked out." But it was the owner, so he got to stay at least. But $100K is a pretty mean fine, but that guy's probably like a multimillionaire.
He's been talking a lot. He was talking a lot this past series.
Yeah, so he's got his money worth, I guess. He got right in the ref's ear too. So, but you mentioned the series that this is who Houston's going to play in the next round. That's Spurs Grizzlies, and this has been an interesting series because after the first 2 games, I thought the Spurs would probably handle this maybe in 5, but the Grizz came back. They won 2 at home. Mike Conley has been huge for this team. Kawhi's been huge for the Spurs. It's actually been a really fun series. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's been a fun series, but like at the same time, I think this is one of the most boring series of the playoffs to this point. Kawhi is doing things that are outstandingly ridiculous. Last night he had 28 points on 9 for 16 shooting, and I just love when somebody only takes 16 shots and has 28 points. But I don't think this series for me kind of hurt my my view of the Spurs. I don't think the Spurs are as good as their record says. Not to take anything away from Memphis, because we know how the grit and grind house works in Memphis. But I don't like the Spurs or Grizzlies' chances next round against the Rockets. Both these teams have offensive issues because besides Conley and Gasol, Memphis, you don't know who else is going to score. I know Zebo's been decent. And then on the flip side, besides Kawhi, LaMarcus Aldridge is not having a very good series.
He's been bad.
Tony Parker is just so inconsistent. He looked really good in game one, like extremely fast, and he hasn't really looked quick since. Patty Mills is solid. Manu's just old. You know, there's just a lot of question marks on both of these teams that just don't fend well after this round.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think the offense is a question for both teams, and that's something you don't really hear much about the Spurs, but I don't know if they have the same three-point shooters. And Aldridge, expected to come, and I kind of touched on this last pod, is, somebody in Portland who was a big-time scorer. He was dominant in the post. And then I think he had a game in the series so far where he had like 38 minutes and he only scored 2 points. He needs to be more aggressive. He needs to, attack these guys, get them in foul trouble, help his team out. I think last game he was a little bit more aggressive, especially rebounding the ball. But I would agree with you. My hype on the Spurs kind of calmed down a little bit. I didn't necessarily think that they were 100% the second best team in the West going to the into the playoffs, but this definitely doesn't help their cause. And the Grizzlies, on the other hand, I would say I think more highly of the Grizzlies, a little bit higher than the Grizzlies than I initially did. Just the fact that Mike Conley's been like outstanding, and he's like elevated his game to another level.
Yeah, no, this has been really good for Memphis in general because I think I believe I was critical. I can't really recall, but a lot of people were critical of that contract he received because he is the highest paid player in the NBA currently. And I think he's done enough this series already to show people that he's worth the money. I know he is a top 10 point guard in this league, and he really controls the tempo and the physical play of Memphis. It really goes unsaid. I mean, when we think about Memphis, we think about Marc Gasol, I feel like, more than Mike Conley, when it should be the other way around at times.
Yeah, and Mike Conley has this like floater in the paint like nailed down perfectly, just like Tony Parker used to have. And like, there's not really much to do when you're defending him, especially when he's in that in-between area and you have Marc Gasol rolling to the rim. It's like, what are you going to do? What decision are you going to make? So definitely it would be nice, as Parth mentioned on the Sunday podcast, that if Chandler Parsons was actually out there, maybe Memphis would be competing even farther in the series.
I don't know about all that, but it's possible.
Well, I mean, if he was healthy and actually playing, they definitely could use somebody who can score the ball.
For sure. I mean, it would help to have Vince Carter come off the bench again and not have to play starter minutes.
Yeah, I mean, like the guys they have to throw out there, it's just like tough. It's really tough, and like you have to give David Fizdale a lot of credit too for having the Grizzlies compete in the series with what they have.
He's done a hell of a job, and he was spot on. One of the other games, he was talking about Kawhi, and he said Kawhi bleeds antifreeze or something.
Yep, he's a robot. So
yeah, that was extremely funny.
Yeah, but on to the next series, another West Coast series, and we're talking Clippers and Jazz. And I know this series has been a lot of fun. I'm happy to see my guy Joe Johnson actually catching some love in the media, and it's been another sad year for the Clippers with Blake Griffin getting hurt.
Yeah, this series I've watched every game. Thank God it's on at 10:30 East Coast time. It's been really fun. It was kind of scary when Gobert got hurt that first game. Obviously, he's back now. Gordon Hayward missed a game for food poisoning, which could have been bad. And it doesn't even matter because Utah gets injuries, and they just find a way to overcome them. Blake Griffin was really unfortunate. But Utah just looks like they're going to be tough. They play defense. Like you said, Joe Johnson is playing as if he's 30 years old in the prime of his career again. Hayward continues to shine. George Hill, I still remember that crazy three George Hill hit in either, what was it, game 1 or game 2? He jumped up in the air and just tossed it up and made a three. Utah's been really impressive. And then for the Clippers, it's just the same old thing. They just don't beat expectations. They don't ever meet expectations. They're just very mediocre when it comes to the playoffs. Chris Paul God bless him. He's doing literally everything he can to try and will this team to a victory, diving for loose balls, getting into Joe Johnson's face last night. And there just isn't enough help for Chris Paul, as sad as that is.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. The Jazz have had injuries, but they're able to kind of handle it with their coaching and the depth they have on their team because they have some nice pieces off the bench and they have some players that can contribute. And they've had a lot of guys step up. A lot of people probably going into the series didn't know much about Joe Ingles. He's had a great season. He's kind of put himself on the map a little bit. Joe Johnson, I mentioned, stepped up. Having a guy like Boris Dio off the bench or Rodney Hood, these guys. And I like what I've seen from Gordon Hayward, especially last night when him and Chris Paul were fighting for that, loose ball on the ground, and he got into it and he wasn't scared. Some players would kind of back down oh, it's Chris Paul, but he didn't care. And I think that says a lot about the Jazz, and they're not going to be an easy out in the playoffs.
No, they won't. And I'm just piggybacking off of that. Quinn Snyder, he has to be top 3 for Coach of the Year for the simple fact that despite any injury that this team has gotten, he's found a way to have the same exact record as the Los Angeles Clippers. His game plans, even when Gobert went down, many people, at least I did personally, I thought game 1 was going to be, Clippers easily. And somehow that game was still competitive and he still found a way to win without having to make a game plan on the fly without your second best player, which just speaks to how well he is. Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things I think for coaching, especially when it comes in the playoffs, because people are going to make changes, they're going to react, and you need to be able to react to those changes. And you're right, Quinn Snyder definitely deserves some Coach of the Year votes, especially when you consider the fact that the Jazz didn't even make the playoffs last season. So, plenty to like if you're a Jazz fan. On the Clippers side, it's just can we fight this series? Can Chris Paul do enough to get us this win? This series is probably one that I've gone the most back and forth with. I started my pick with the Clippers in 7, and I still was a little bit unsure with that. Then Gobert goes down. I'm like, all right, Clippers will win the series. Then I see them win. I'm like, all right, it'll still probably be a good series, but I still like the Clippers. Then Blake goes down, and then Gobert comes back. I think it's in the Jazz's favor now.
Yeah, I picked Jazz in 7 to start the series, and I'm gonna remain pat with that. I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Clippers won, just because they do have more playoff experience, obviously.
And Chris Paul really, 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 really wants to win. You can just see it every time in his frustration in losing that this is really getting to him.
Which also causes, this is a little bit out of playoff picture, but if the Clippers don't win this series, LA will not look the same next year. I find it hard to believe that this team will be able to keep this core for a 6th straight year after having no success with it. But
I think Chris Paul's gone for sure, especially if they get knocked out in this first round series. He's got no time to lose in the first round anymore.
So you think he blows off that verbal commitment he already made?
Yeah, I think things will change. He made a verbal commitment to them, or I didn't see that.
He said he's resigning. Earlier in the season for $200 million, they had a verbal discussion.
I think things do change, and I think especially if we get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, he probably thought that they would at least go to the second round and have a decent playoff run. But anything could happen. I would think at least one of them's gone. They're obviously not doing enough. Their team is just not going to get to the next level with what they have. They need to make a big change. If that means trading Blake or getting another big piece in there, maybe getting rid of Chris Paul and keeping Blake and DeAndre, bringing somebody else in. But they're not getting any better. They're not getting any worse. They're just kind of staying even at that same level of getting knocked out in the playoffs every year and not getting to the conference finals.
I think one or two things are going to happen. I'm pretty sold on this. I think Blake Griffin's gone. I think he's going to opt out to go try and get money before anyone thinks he can't stay healthy. If Chris Paul does stay, I think Melo automatically gets traded for the most part. I kind of think Melo goes – if Chris Paul stays in L.A., this is where Melo's going to end up to some degree. It's the only thing that makes sense. They're desperate to try and add more talent and more scoring, so why not go and add one of the top scorers of all time?
That would work, and it actually could help the team a little bit. Not saying Carmelo is a better player than Blake, but it could kind of open up some different things for them and maybe mess around with some other things. I think if Melo went to the Clippers, they would definitely play him at the 4. But he would add more with his 3-point shooting.
Right, and it fits the small ball teams in the West, which there's so many of nowadays.
And Carmelo would probably be the happiest player in the NBA because he's never got to play with a great point guard other than an old Jason Kidd. So
Yeah.
getting Chris Paul at this point, and his life is just going to be so much easier.
Plus, now that he's single, there's a lot of girls in LA. So
yeah, and Melo's already looking. But talking about the series that's probably about to tip off in about 20 minutes or so, and that's Wizards and Hawks. I think there's not really much to say about the series because I think Game 5 is going to say a lot. The Wizards won the first two at home. The Hawks won the next two in their home court. So this Game 5 is going to let us know, was it just because whoever's home is going to win, or is the Hawks really make a change and they're going to turn things around and make this series more competitive and push it to 7 or possibly win it all?
Washington all season has been very good at home. We've known that. They had that 17-game win streak at home before. They had that overtime loss to LeBron James and the Cavs, where LeBron hit that crazy turnaround three. I'm very impressed with my memory, by the way. Yeah, this is a big game, obviously. All Game 5s and the 2-2 are pivotal, turning points in most series. I'm shocked a little bit. I kind of thought – I didn't expect Atlanta to bounce back like they did. But then again, they have, the experience.
And I think that's really something that's obvious in the series. The Wizards seem like a young playoff team, and they don't come out hard in the first quarter. Even in Game 3, when they just got the Hawks just came out and smacked them in the face, and they just had that early big lead. It's just the Wizards don't seem as in the moment as much, and the Hawks kind of realize what's going on, and they have that playoff edge. Even though Washington's been a more physical team, it doesn't necessarily mean they've had that playoff edge or what's needed to win these games.
And besides John Wall and Beal, no one has really stepped up and had a big impact, in game.
Exactly, and that's been an issue for them. And it's been the Wall and Beal show, and Beal had one rough game as well in the series. But they need Otto Porter to step up. They need Markieff Morris. I think Gortat hasn't really been that great. They kind of need some more out of him. Defensively, he's been in a lot of foul trouble, and that's been an issue too. One of our writers actually wrote something up on Washington and how the issue in the series is they've just been fouling a ton. I think they've been almost giving up 30 free throws a game. So good luck winning that way. Yeah,
that's not a recipe for winning. But like you said on Porter, I expect a lot more from Porter, especially after he was top 5 in 3-point percentage this season, and I don't know if he's had over 20 points yet this series. Not that it's a huge thing, scoring 20 points, but he just hasn't been that third scoring option that he was all season.
Yeah, he hasn't been as aggressive, and I also feel like he hasn't been as aggressive as when they traded for Bojan Bogdanovic. And Otto Porter, we all know that he's going to be a free agent this year. I hope the Nets sign him, but you would expect kind of more aggressive play from him because he is that third option. He can kind of give him that extra element. He can hit threes. He can slash a little bit, but he hasn't really stepped. Markieff Morris had that big Game 1, and the bench scoring has been sporadic at best. Bojan's had a few okay games, and then Brandon Jennings had that game where he got really hot. But they just need to step up as a team. And on the other side, Atlanta, they've had guys step up. Kent Bazemore's had a pretty bad season, but he's had some nice moments in the playoffs. Tim Hardaway's had some nice moments. Schroeder stepped up. Dwight's improving. He started off Game 1 and Game 2 like trash, but going home kind of gave him some more energy. And Paul Millsap's obviously been great.
Yeah, I think, honestly, tonight, if Washington doesn't find a way to pull out this game, Atlanta will win this series.
Yeah, no, I think so, too. I think that it would be a really bad look for the Wizards, especially with the hype going into the postseason for them.
Yeah, but I do think not that I don't believe in the Wizards, but every other team in the East, besides Cleveland, they're all missing that one guy. And for Washington, despite having Otto Porter and Markieff Morris and Gortat, they're just missing that one piece that puts them over that makes them an actual threat in the East. Whereas Atlanta, they have just enough veteran experience that you can beat teams that are missing pieces like Washington, even if Washington is the better team in the series.
Exactly. They just need that extra player. They need that one more push over the top. So, it's still good experience, though, for Wall and Beal. And they don't have any, other than Otto Porter, I don't think they have any huge free agents. So maybe they can make a trade or kind of work something out to add some more talent to this team. They definitely need to add another big to the bench. Jan Mahinmi obviously has been injured, so maybe they're expecting more out of him. But Jason Smith having to come in and be your third big isn't really ideal.
Yeah, it was.
So that's a big game that's going to happen today. And then another series that's kind of been 2-2-2-2, and that's the Boston Celtics and Chicago Bulls. And this story has been great to watch. It's had a ton of storylines. Obviously, we had the sad news about Isaiah Thomas's sister, but Rondo was playing great in game 1 and game 2, broke his thumb. Then Boston bounces back, wins game 3 and game 4. Like we said about the Washington-Atlanta series, game 5 is going to be huge tonight.
Man, Boston, what a bunch of busters for a 1 seed. I'm glad I can finally say that on air. Man, they just don't have enough rebounding. But yeah, Isaiah Thomas, it was them alive. Yeah, Isaiah Thomas, it was honestly a tragedy. Obviously, losing his 22-year-old sister, China. Heartfelt. My heart really goes out to him and his family. But, he's been there all 4 games. He's willing himself and trying to will these Celtics pass a first round for the first time in a couple of years. The only thing I can really say about Boston is they really messed up by not trading for Jimmy Butler. Every time I watch Chicago and I'm watching Jimmy Butler, dismantle Boston, I think in my head, like, this could have been yours, Boston. You could have had this.
Yeah, and obviously they could use him because when Isaiah Thomas isn't cooking, and in game 1 and game 2 it was more apparent. In game 3 and game 4, other guys have stepped up, but they definitely have issues when you shut down IT. They don't really have a ton of other creators. Gerald Green's coming and giving some nice points, which is kind of random, to be honest. Al Horford stepped up a little bit, but like you said, they definitely could have used Jimmy Butler, especially in the playoffs and in this situation. It's not like Butler doesn't play defense either, so what do you think about Rondo? There was a report he was going to try to play today, but he's not. Then it was reported after that he's not playing today. It's likely we probably see him game 6, game 7. Do you think he can change the series, or the thumb's going to be too much, or was kind of overhyped his play anyways?
This is a good question. This is actually a really good question. I said this last night. We were watching Clippers, Utah, and I said, I believe Rondo's going to play in game 6. Unless Chicago wins game 5, then Rondo won't play game 6. But when it's an elimination game, Rondo's going to play. If Chicago's
funny you say that, because on Sunday's pod, I was like, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me at all, even though he has a broken thumb, if Rondo suits up game 6, game 7. And what happens? Rondo suits up game 6, game 7. It's kind of something, like you said, you expect out of him. The elimination game, he's going to bring all the extra juice. And the one thing that's like somewhat scary for the Celtics is like the Bulls only have to really win. They win one more of these games and push to 7, and they have all the playoff experience on their side. They have these ISO scores. These guys have done it before. I know Butler's never won a championship, but he's had some deep playoff runs. And Dwayne Wade obviously is a champion. Rondo is a champion. And they have some other vets on this team that can kind of give them that edge in a possible game 7 matchup.
Wade, for what it's worth, besides, the dunk where he clanked the rim,
he's had a couple missed layups too on fast breaks, which has been bad.
Yeah, but he hasn't been awful this series though. He isn't Dwayne Wade. Obviously, he's 35 years old now, but he's been enough. And I like you said, they just have experience. If Rondo gets on the floor, I just think that's an absolute game changer. Because the fact of the matter is, Rondo may not be a good defender anymore, but against Isaiah Thomas, the fact that Rondo still is quick and still has size, he can still be a nuisance at least to Isaiah. And the playmaking and rebounding he gives you is still more than Isaiah gives on the other side, which is why I think Chicago had so much success the first 2 games.
Yeah, that's a very good point you made about Rondo, and I don't even think that he's not a good defender. I just think he is lazy when it comes to the regular season, and then when the playoffs come on, he's like, "Yep, I'm ready to lock in." And Dwayne Wade touched on this at a press conference, like Rondo watches a ton of film, and I mentioned it in a pod before, is like he was disrupting what Boston was trying to do on offense. So he was just kind of messing up their offense, eating shot clock, and kind of killing what they were trying to do. And like you said, the playmaking, the rebounding, he kind of set the pace for Chicago, and he also made it a lot easier for some of these guys to get easy baskets, like a Robin Lopez, or even making Jimmy Butler's life a little bit easier, not having to work so hard to get the easy baskets.
Yeah, because without Rondo, we've seen Butler kind of like take on that playmaker role. He had I think he had 28 and 8 the last game. But, he keeps having to play playmaker. And obviously, when Rondo's on the floor, Jimmy can go into playing just defense and scoring. He doesn't have to worry about getting other guys involved as much, which is obviously a load off his back.
Exactly. And then it also is the fact that the point guards that Chicago has to play in place of Rondo are pretty bad.
Oh my
Michael Carter
God,
Williams.
they're tremendously bad. I know
Yeah,
Michael
Jeremy
Carter
Grant.
Williams
Isaiah
got
Cannon had some big shots last game, but obviously he's not consistently going to help them.
yeah, Michael Carter Williams got in the face of Isaiah Thomas too last game, and it was just so laughable because first off, I think Isaiah would still destroy him in like any type of physical altercation. And it's also like, bro, you're not good. Like, you don't go face to face to stars like that when you're somebody like you.
Yeah, and it's just so crazy for Michael Carter Williams because even his, he won Rookie of the Year and it looked like he was going to have a promising career. All he had to do was add a jump shot, and it's been just like straight downhill.
He was actually, you're right. He was a good rebounder and playmaker in Philly. I mean, Philly was awful, but
yeah, people gave him like, not that he was like a Jason Kidd, but he was a Jason Kidd type player where like he was impacting the game without scoring a ton. His playmaking, like you said, and his rebounding and his defense with his length, and then it's just like he went to Milwaukee, he got worse, and then it's just everything from there has just been downhill from. So it's just like, sorry, it sucks for Michael Carter Williams, but nothing you can do. It happens with some players.
And one thing I want to say about Boston too is, Avery Bradley has not looked very good since this injury he came back from. I know a lot of people like really haven't talked about that, but he just doesn't look as good as he used to, or like has in the past. And I think that he's just not fully healthy, which is, it hasn't been reported. So he could be healthy, but like he just hasn't looked like that number 2 option they had him as before, which is really bad because besides Isaiah, there isn't anyone on this team who is consistently scoring. Al Horford had a decent game 4. But Al Horford is a third scoring option on most teams. Jay Crowder, yeah, he's solid defensively, but offensively he's pretty much a roll of the dice. And then there's just Marcus Smart is so sporadic, as we know. There's just so many holes on this team, and you need a guy like Avery Bradley who's going against 35-year-old Dwayne Wade to really take advantage of his youth and his athletic ability against Wade. I'm looking for Bradley to have a big game tonight. Yeah,
Bradley, I think he had a pretty good game 3, maybe it was. But other than that, he hasn't been, has as much pop. Early in the season, like you said, he was really that like clear-cut second option. He was putting up like 30-point games. He was just like killing it from the field. He was, hitting jump shots all over the court. But maybe if they can get him going, get him healthier, get him in the rhythm, it'll help them if they advance.
Oh, here, I just pulled up Avery Bradley's stats. He's averaging he's shooting 38.3% from the field and 36% from 3. So, I mean, not awful, but definitely nothing that stands out as good.
Yeah, I mean, the 3-point percentage is pretty good, but the shooting under 40% from the field is never anything nice. So, maybe they can bounce him back, kind of get him some easy situations. Also, Chicago's played good defense at times. They've also been inconsistent and played bad defense too. But talking about the last series out there, and that's the Raptors and the Bucks. And this one's been kind of an interesting one too, because going after game 1, everyone was like, it looks like the Bucks are going to really send a message to Toronto. And then after game 3, it was like, all right, the Bucks are up 2-1. But then Toronto comes back, wins 2 games. It's 3-2, and it looks like the Raptors are kind of finally getting in their playoff mode, even though it took them a few games.
Oh, man. What if Jabari Parker was healthy? Milwaukee has definitely been a surprise. I think it's been another case of them showing the league that they're up and coming. Because Milwaukee very well could become a dynasty within the next 5 years if this core stays healthy. Giannis has obviously been tremendous. He's struggled. He's been struggling in the last couple of games. They finally seem to figure out how to limit him a little bit. Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, they're finally shooting the ball, which is very nice to see. I know DeRozan won a game where he didn't even make a shot. I don't think I've ever seen a star go a playoff game without making a single shot in the first round, at least.
Especially somebody who can attack the rim the way he can.
Oh my! It was the strangest thing.
He's kind of a strange like star in that way. It's like I'm not like 100% surprised that he scored 0 field goals, because I could see him as a type that would do that, because I think it's kind of obvious in a way that like Lowry and DeRozan let the playoffs get in their head a little bit, especially with the slow starts in the series and like the slow starts they have every year.
Yeah, and I did pick Toronto to win this in 5, so obviously now we're going 6. I think it's crazy how much Valanciunas has looked like a complete liability.
Yeah, we talked about that on Sunday. He just hasn't been the same player.
Man, he just looks slow. He looks confused at times. It's shocking. But I mean, they're lucky. If they didn't trade Ibaka, this different series, because Ibaka's been huge for them.
He's had his presence felt on offense, defense. He's kind of been like that. They're, if Lowry and DeRozan get their shit together going to the next round, and they have someone like Norman Powell playing big off the bench, PJ Tucker, some of these role guys step up, like the Raptors can kind of actually turn around this playoff postseason for themselves and kind of make this interesting in the next round and maybe get to the conference finals. They look like a completely different team than what we saw in Game 3. Obviously, the next game in the series will say a lot about them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they pull it in 6.
Yeah, and I think I do think Toronto wins this series overall. I don't think Milwaukee's ready. I just this is their first playoff experience. Just like a couple. Actually, who else hasn't? No, I mean Washington has some playoff experience, but yes. They don't have much playoff experience. They have Jason Kidd. I think Jason Kidd now. I know a lot of Milwaukee fans wanted Jason Kidd fired all season. I think maybe they can start to respect Jason Kidd a little bit more because he hasn't done an awful job. But Toronto, if they make it out of this round, will give Cleveland some trouble next round.
Yeah. No, they have some potential on this team, and I like what you said about the Bucks, though. I feel like even though the Bucks are probably going to lose this series, I feel like this year was a success for them. Because if you told most people, after Jabari Parker went down that they were going to come back and make the playoffs, they would have been like, no. But they did, and Chris Middleton's been great. And Jason Kidd's also done some good stuff in the playoffs. And obviously this has been a great experience for Giannis, who's going to be one of the top 5 players in the league sooner than later. So if I'm a Bucks fan, I can lose this series and still be happy.
This is, again, a little bit off topic, but I saw something on Twitter last night when I was scrolling. Someone made the point that because Patty Mills is a free agent at the upcoming offseason, that a guy like him would be exactly what Milwaukee's missing. And I just want to say Patty Mills in Milwaukee would make me incredibly happy.
Yeah, that would be. And we touched on this a little bit last pod, and there was somebody mentioning that Chris Paul going to Milwaukee is being something interesting too. Ooh. But Patty Mills also could be another option in the sense that he doesn't need the ball. He's a great 3-point shooter, and it kind of lets Giannis still run the show.
Yeah, because Delly has been, he's still that nuisance of a defender, but his jump shot has not been the same since he left Cleveland.
Yeah, Malcolm Brogdon's been pretty good for them. I mean, he's a rookie, so it'll be interesting to see what the Bucks do in the offseason. They're always somebody who's like really active too.
Is Brogdon considered a shooting guard or a point guard?
A point guard, but he definitely could play both.
Okay, I've always been confused. I consider him like a shooting guard, but I know that he lines up as a point guard at times.
Yeah, he's got the size to play both positions, but he's got the skill set to play point guard too. Obviously, when you have a player like Giannis, who's like your whatever position you want to call him, run the show, then you're as we go forward in the NBA, there's just not going to be positions anymore. Like you're just going to throw out guys, and you might be able to identify the one guy as a center, but the other 4 positions, you might not know who's playing what.
Which do you like that?
I like that. I think that's the direction that most teams are heading. Like when I look at the Nets team and I'm thinking about it, and I like versatility when I look at it defensively, especially when you have the ability to switch 1 through 4, that is just such an aid to your team. Even if you can your 5 is able to switch onto some wing defenders, that's such an asset to have. It makes I think switching is such a if your guys can actually defend and you can switch and still play good defense, switching it makes it a lot easier to defend pick and roll.
Well, yeah, especially if you have guys who can guard multiple positions. Then a switch, if you have a high pick and roll and you can just switch off with a guy who can play, who can defend 1 through 4, it helps your chances on covering that pick and roll. So You're right. Yeah, you're right in that instance. It does make it easier for the defense.
And offensively, I feel like the league is just going to where you're putting playmakers and guys who can make shots on the floor. When I look at a team, I'm looking for a team to have more than one playmaker on the floor, because if you only can have one guy that can dribble and make plays for everybody and set the offense up, it makes it that much harder for the rest of the team, because all they have to do is lock him up, and if nobody else can do anything, then you're just screwed.
Which we see, funny you say that, we see that with OKC.
Yeah, exactly.
Off the floor, there's no one else who can create for them.
And I'm not even talking about huge creating, running the offense all by yourself.
Yeah, but someone who can just help others get involved.
Exactly. And some of it is just guys having the ability to drive and dish the ball and make the right pass, or be able to do three things, shoot, score at the rim, and pass the ball and dribble. If they're able to do that, it's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, having that high IQ.
What's your picks for tonight's games? Wizards and Hawks and Bulls and Celtics.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the home teams. I think Washington wins this game. I'm going to say probably by 15. I think Washington takes care of home court, and then I'm going to say Boston wins Game 5 as well, taking care of their home court. Home court. Obviously, both these teams, Washington took care of home court in their first two games. Boston did not. When you get later in the series, when every game means a lot more than the first couple, I think the energy that the crowd gives off is so much more valuable to the team. And I'm just expecting TD Garden to be rocking, and I don't know where Washington plays, but they're too.
I think the Verizon Center, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
Shout out to the Wizards for having, they had this 6 o'clock start, which is kind of weird as hell because it's about to start right now. We're recording this, but they did a smart thing where they had a $5 food combo for anybody that came to the game before 6. Trying to get people in the seats is a big deal because I know it's kind of annoying as a fan, or probably it's annoying as a player when you don't see anybody in their seats in the first quarter, and the game it doesn't really fill up until the second quarter, especially the big cities.
Right. Didn't Houston do that last night? They did $1 beers and $1.
Oh yeah, $1 beer and like hot dogs or something, and that's a genius. That's genius.
Man, what a beautiful thing that was. You know how many people were hammered? Wow.
Yeah. Exactly.
That was a rowdy crowd.
The price they charge you for beer at the game, it's like $10 for one beer. So getting one for $1 is like you can't even find that anywhere.
Especially us who live in New York and go to the Barclays Center and MSG. We never get anything cheap.
Yeah, honestly, if I want to just get like a soda, like fries and like chicken tenders, maybe it's almost like $20.
So not worth it. Exactly. But you have to do it when you go. It's the funniest thing.
Yeah, like no matter what you do, like you leave early, you're like, oh, we'll stop at McDonald's, but nope, never happens.
Like the whole way to the game, you're like, something, I'm only gonna get like what I need to get. Like I don't want to get anything extra. Then you get there, you're like, wow, I'm pretty hungry.
Yeah, and then you end up buying like the food. Then you're like, oh, this T-shirt's really cool. And then the next thing you know, you're dropping like 50 to 100 at the game. But let me throw my picks out there. I'm going to agree with you. Home court. I think the Wizards handle business. They need to bounce back. And the Celtics, I feel like, are in line to win the series now. And they're going to take care of business at home because they lost the first two.
Okay, now, since we both picked the same, who do you think has the better chance to win tonight between Atlanta and Chicago?
That is a great question. I guess I would probably just have to go with Atlanta because I just feel like Chicago – it just doesn't have that extra spark without Rondo.
I actually feel differently. I kind of think Chicago could surprise.
I could see both ways, but
I just think I don't know. I'm expecting the Chicago and Boston game to go down to the wire. I really think Wade in particular is going to have a really big impact tonight, and I'm expecting Bradley to try and have a big impact. But like you said, Atlanta definitely has the best chance to pull off an unseen win tonight.
Yeah, and I think the momentum too is going to help Atlanta in the fact that they've won the last two and Chicago lost the last two without Rondo, and just like in the back of your head, like, oh, we don't have Rondo. Somebody's going to have to step up on Chicago.
Right,
one of these role players,
the mental aspect
is just going to have to make a splash. So see what happens tonight. Kory, thanks for filling in for Harris. And as always, thanks everybody for listening, and make sure you hit that subscribe button.